Welcome to Girls Night Live. We are so happy you're here with us today. Today we come to you live from New Rochelle, New York. A warm welcome to Girls Night Live, Jessica Levinson. Welcome, Jess.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. So happy to be here. Thank you, Girls Night Live, for having me. So excited today to be sharing some vegetarian 4th of July recipes. I can't believe that we're already at July 4th weekend. To me, that feels like we're midway through the summer, but we're not going to let it go by that fast. These are recipes that you can use throughout the summer and beyond as well. So just a little bit about myself. I'm Jessica Levinson. I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist with a focus on culinary nutrition and feeding healthy families. I have twin daughters of my own who are 9.5 years old, and I love nothing more than cooking for my family and for guests and making sure that food is delicious, but also healthy. And it just makes me so happy to see other people enjoying my recipes and coming up with their own creative innovations on and spins on what I make. So you'll see with what I'm going to make today that these recipes can really be modified to your own taste, and you can use them as inspiration. You'll also there's a PDF with the recipes on them. If you're not cooking along, you'll get that if you signed up. You'll get that in an email after. The recipes are also on my website, jessicalevinson.com. And please feel free to subscribe to my newsletter where I post recipes. In my newsletter, I share recipes that I posted on my website, as well as tips for feeding a healthy family. And you can find the subscribe link in the chat, as well as on my website. There's a box for subscribing. So with that, I'm going to get started, and please feel free to put questions in the chat or in the Facebook while I'm going along, and I will answer questions as they come up. So the first recipe that I want to share is really simple, easy, a great appetizer or hors d'oeuvre for a barbecue that you're hosting, or even if you just want like a little afternoon snack. And those are my watermelon feta mint skewers. So I already have cut up watermelon that I cut into sticks, which, by the way, this is a really fun way to serve your kids watermelon as opposed to in the triangle, because it saves them from getting the juice all over their face. So it's a really fun way to do it. You can even put them into the freezer and they become like a little ice pop. So I had these already cut up for when I had some friends of my kids over the other day. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these, I'm just going to cut them into squares. So if we could just, I have my cutting board here. If you want to switch to that screen. So you can see I cut them into about, a half a finger's length cube. And I'm going to cut a bunch of those up. And like I said, this doesn't have to be perfect. Some of these are thinner than others. And I don't like to waste any little bit. So I'll use all the parts up until the rind. And you can even pickle the rinds if you want to reduce food waste even more. So I have these cubes, and we'll just start with those. And then I have a block of feta here that that I just took out of the package. So I'm going to cut those into cubes as well. So I'm going to cut that in half and then to a little bit smaller of a bite. One of the things that's great about this recipe is that if you don't like feta cheese, you can definitely use something else. I've also made these with mozzarella balls, and they're delicious. So, again, make it your way and for your taste. All right. So here I have my skewers. Very simple. We're going to do watermelon, feta. Now we're going to get the mint. I have some freshly rinsed mint here. I'm going to rip off a leaf. Add that. And again, if you don't like mint, add some basil. Another great way to make it your own. And so then I just continue, mix it up, add more watermelon, less cheese, however you want to do it. Really have fun with it. Have your kids get involved in making this. This is a really great recipe for them to make with you and help you out in the kitchen. So here I'm just gonna, sorry, I want to get that on screen. Just gonna make a couple more. And while I'm doing this, if you have any questions about it, let me know. Oh, here's a good question that just popped up. What happens if the feta breaks? So just, restick it, make it work. If it crumbles a little bit, that's okay. Do it without it, pick another one. Feta can be a little bit crumbly, so it can be a little tricky. But no matter how you want it, it's gonna be delicious. So let's keep going with making these. Oops. And then what I do for serving them is I add a little bit of a balsamic glaze on top. So here I have a bottle of aged balsamic, and it says balsamic glace original. So this is aged balsamic. Sometimes you will find potentially at a store something that says glazed balsamic that has added sugar to it. So ideally you want to look for the aged balsamic that doesn't have any added sugar. That's just a little tip from a nutritional standpoint. We have a lot of sugar in our diet. Some of it is natural, like from the watermelon, and some of it is added, like when we have cookies and cakes and sweets like that. There's added sugar in those. So if when I'm looking at the bottle for this, I can see that there's 10 grams of sugar in the aged balsamic, but it's coming from it naturally being aged. And as vinegar reduces, it becomes sweet on its own. So a lot of times people use this on like tomato and mozzarella. I happen to think it's delicious with fruit. If you put some on strawberries, fresh strawberries, it's amazing. And the same thing with putting it on this. So I just like to drizzle a little bit, and there you have a super easy beautiful hors d'oeuvre or appetizer, or even a light lunch if you wanted to, put this on the side with a piece of chicken, grilled chicken. It's a great little side dish as well. So I hope that you guys will give it a try. And if you do and you make it, please, I'd love to see your creation. So post pictures and tag me on Instagram at jlevinsonrd, so that I can see what you guys make as well. So that's number one. And then next up, I'm going to, well, before I move on, are there any questions that have come in? Anything that anyone's asked?
So Linda from Facebook wants to know, can you explain how you cut the watermelon into, she called them soldiers. Love the freezing idea. Do you half it, then quarter it? Can you explain?
Yes. So great question. And I apologize that I don't have a whole watermelon here. I was afraid I wouldn't have enough time to show you how to do it from the start. So I'll explain what I do. I buy a whole watermelon, or even if you buy a half a watermelon, I start with that. I have it straight down the middle. And then let me back up for a second. Always make sure that you wash your watermelon or any melon before you cut into it, because even though we're not eating the rind, unless you're going to be preserving it or doing something with it, we still want to prevent any bacteria that's on the outside from getting in. So just a little food safety tip: rinse it off, make sure that any dirt that's on it from the ground is off of it, pat it dry. And then very carefully, because it's going to roll a little bit, you want to use a chef's knife. I use this knife normally. I think this is a 10-inch or an 8-inch chef's knife. And I slice it right down the middle. And then I put one half to the side. Then I put the other half on the flat side down, so that it's a semicircle, but you always want, if you can, to have the flat side down, so that nothing, the knife doesn't slip as you're cutting. And then what I do is I cut off the edges a little bit, because that's where most of the white part is going to be on the rind. So I cut off the edges, and then I just slice it into pieces, and then I slice it again this way. So basically, like, well, does that make sense? I know it's a little hard to explain without seeing it in action, but and if it's too hard to keep it all together like that, then sometimes I just cut it into slices, and then I turn those bigger slices. So now you have a big semicircle slice, And then I cut them into pieces like that. And that's how you end up with these soldiers. And I love that. I'm going to call them soldiers from now on. That's such a fun name for it. So Linda, I hope that explains it and is helpful. Next time I do it, I will take a picture and maybe make a little video of it and put it on my Instagram so that you can see it as well. So,
okay, one more. Alice from
Yep.
Facebook. Does it become more sweet the older the balsamic gets? How many years do you like to look for?
Yes, it does. That's why it's so delicious with fruit, because the aging process makes it sweeter. So I don't have a specific number of years that I look for. It really depends on what's available in the supermarket. This brand, Colavita, is one of the only brands that I've ever really been able to find that has the aged balsamic without any sugar added. But if you look in your oil and vinegar section in the supermarket, you should be able to find something similar to this, if not this. So it doesn't even say on here exactly the age, but I don't think, unless you're at a very specialty supermarket, or if you're in Italy, perhaps, you may not find much variety in terms of how many years it's been aged. So, and again, if you can't find the one without sugar added, keep in mind that a little bit of, if you find the one that does have some added sugar, it's not the biggest deal. We just want to keep it, I prefer to save my added sugar for cookies and cakes and, stuff like that, some, candy and things like that, and have less added sugar within my savory recipes. But as long as, overall, you're not overdoing it on added sugar, that little bit of glaze isn't going to make the huge difference. So I hope that you're able to find it, though. All right.
Okay, last
one.
Yep, last one. Is there another type of cheese you could use besides the feta?
Yes. So I mentioned before mozzarella balls, little mozzarella, or if you can't find the balls, you can slice up mozzarella and into cubes. That's also really delicious with it. Those would be my top two. And like I said, you could do the mozzarella with basil as well. Basil and watermelon is also delicious. So really you can play around with it and see what you like. So, all right, great. So the second recipe is grilled avocados stuffed with corn and black bean salsa. And this is something that you can take from, again, an appetizer to a side dish to a main course. If you're completely vegetarian, it's a vegan recipe. It has no dairy in it at all. And so if you wanted to turn this into a full meal, there are ways that you can do that for a vegetarian. So I'm going to show you the basic recipe, and then I'm going to give you a few ideas of how you can mix it up. So first, we're going to make the salsa. So I have here half a cup of black beans, and one little tip on the black beans. These are canned black beans. I usually buy a can of low sodium black beans, and when I drain it, I rinse it, and that helps reduce even more sodium. A lot of people think that canned vegetables and canned foods are very high in sodium, and they can be higher in sodium, but when you drain and rinse them, you actually reduce a lot of the sodium that's in it. So that's one thing that I would suggest. So I already here have though half a cup, and I'm going to add to that corn. So I have here a pre-grilled ear of corn, and I'm going to use a serrated knife to show you how I get the corn off the cob. So I just put it on its side, and I slice off the corn as close as possible to the ear to get as much as I can. And one thing with this recipe is that I have exact measurements for everything in the recipe itself. But again, if you like more black beans or more corn or less onion, you can totally make this. You don't have to measure out the ingredients for this. One of the things that I love about cooking is that over baking. My husband always says I'm a perfectionist, and he says he's surprised that I don't like to bake more. But the thing is that when I'm in the kitchen, that's my space to let go. And so I don't like having to measure. So I'm not going to show you a measuring cup right now. I'm just going to show you, here I have 1 ear of corn. It's probably about, it's at least a half a cup. I can tell from the cutting board. So I'm going to add that to the beans. Okay. And then I have red onion. So again, I'm not starting with a whole red onion because I had this in the refrigerator. So I'm going to just show you, I'm very opposed to food waste. I really try to not waste food. So I figured rather than start with something with a whole brand new one, let me show you how I do this. But to get to where this is already, I had the whole onion. I had cut it in half. And then this way I was able to take the peel off more easily. And so now I have half an onion. So I'm going to show you how I dice this. So I don't know, if you're comfortable with knife skills in the kitchen, but this is just a little demo. So I put it again on the flat side to make sure that it's not wobbly, because if I try to do it this way, I risk cutting myself. So always put on the flat side. And then I'm going to make horizontal slices almost to the end, almost to the root side. You'll see I left the root here so that it holds it together. So depending on how thick you want your dice to be, you can make more or less of these horizontal cuts. Okay, now I'm going to go vertical. And you'll notice this hand, I'm holding the onion steady using a bear claw. That's what I always call it, especially with the kids. When you get your kids to start using knives and helping in the kitchen, you really want to make sure that they're being very careful. So as you can see, some of it's falling apart while I'm doing it, but that's fine because I'm going to be chopping it up. So now, once I have that, these already came out, but now I go across and you can see I have a dice. And that allows for a pretty even consistency in the size across the board. So I'm not going to put all of this in here because for this amount of corn and black beans, it would be a lot of red onion. So I'm just, again, I have amounts on the recipe. I'm just going to throw what I want in right now and add that to it. And then the next thing I'm going to do is add in some tomatoes. So I have here some pre-washed cherry tomatoes, and I'm going to use my serrated knife again for this. A lot of people, when they slice up tomatoes, they use a chef's knife that ends up, it sort of like squishes the tomato a little bit when you try to use a chef's knife. So I use a serrated knife so I can get a clean cut. And I'm just cutting these into fourths so that I have a dice and adding those right into the rest of the vegetables in the bowl. And for this one, I had these colorful tomatoes. You can use beef steak tomatoes that you dice up, or grape tomatoes, whatever tomatoes you like. But this time of year, we're getting into tomato season, so there's lots of delicious varieties out there. So you can see, I think you can see, if I can, you can see the bowl. We're getting to have a very colorful salsa here. And are there any questions that are coming in while I'm slicing these up?
Here, Mandy from Facebook. Do you wrap the corn in tin foil and grill it on an outdoor grill? Can you do it in the oven? I do not have an outdoor grill.
Yeah, great question. So you can wrap it in tin foil. You can, to grill it, for people who do want to know how to grill it, you can wrap it in tin foil, or you can just shuck it and put it directly on the grill. Usually what I do is I put it directly on, about 5 minutes on a side, and then I turn it a little bit. And so it usually takes about 15 minutes total, because I'll turn it 3 times until I see, until it looks done to me. You can also do it in the oven. I haven't done that very much. I think I did that maybe once or twice. But the other thing to note is this is a recipe that, although it's very summery, you can really make this all year long. I have made this with frozen corn as well. And what I'll do for that is I'll just saute the frozen corn in a skillet on the stovetop, just to get a little bit of that like added flavor with a little bit of olive oil. And I'll use that as well. So if you don't have a grill, don't worry about it at all. It's a great recipe, no matter how you want to cook it. Are there any other questions that have come in?
See, love how you cut the onion. Thanks for showing us that from Alicia and Andrea. Such great knife tips. Thank you. So we got a lot of thank yous coming in.
Okay, great. Well, you're welcome. I'm so happy. I think knife skills are really important, and something, you know, to be safe in the kitchen, you really want to make sure that you know what you're doing. And always, another thing with knives, make sure that they are not dull. If you haven't had them sharpened in a while, get them sharpened. There's nothing that's less safe than a dull knife. As sharp as a knife is, it's safer than a dull knife. So that's my little PSA. Okay, so now I have the tomatoes added. And the next thing that we're gonna do is the cilantro. Now, cilantro is a pretty divisive herb. Some people really don't like it. There are people who, there's a chemical in it that makes some people think it tastes like soap. I personally am a huge cilantro fan, so I use it in a lot of my cooking, but you could easily leave the cilantro out of this. But I'm gonna show you how to do it right now. Let me just clean off my cutting board real quick. Okay, so I already washed this. And one thing with cilantro is you can use, I'm just gonna take one piece here so you can see, you can use the entire stalk. When I have a steak recipe that I make, and I make a cilantro sauce with it, and I put the entire sprig of cilantro in the blender to puree it all, because there's tons of flavor in here. But when I'm making a recipe like this, I tend to take off just the leaves, because sometimes the stalk part is a little bit more fibrous and a little chewier. So for something like this, I either will toss this, or I'll put it aside to save it to make a puree. You add it to a chimichurri sauce or a dressing that you want. So there's a lot of great things you can do with it. But for this recipe, I'm just going to use the leaves and the more delicate part of the sprig. So just going to do that real quick so you can see, and then I'm going to chop it up. And this is another, if you don't like cilantro, basil would work really well in this as well. You could even do rosemary if you wanted. But sticking with the summer flavors, basil and cilantro would be my top two choices. All right. So we don't need a lot. And here I'm going to just chop it. So I put it all together into a bunch, and I just slowly go, and then I go a little faster in this rocking back and forth motion until it's roughly chopped. It doesn't need to be all, you know, tiny little pieces. And then I'm going to add that. And then we're going to add some lime. So I have a fresh lime here. I already rinsed it. Again, same thing with the watermelon. Make sure you wash it so we don't get bacteria in the middle going in. And I'm going to cut it in half. And this is one of my favorite kitchen tools. This is a hand juicer. This is the OXO brand. I use this all the time. I love adding freshly squeezed juice to recipes like this, as well as dressings, marinades. It just adds such a great pop of flavor, and a little bit goes a long way. So usually one lime is about 2 tablespoons. A small lime like this, maybe 2 tablespoons of lime juice. So I'm just gonna, like I said, I'm not measuring. I'm just gonna squeeze that right in. And for this one, I'm going to use this lime was really small, so I'm going to use the whole thing. Oh, and let me just point out. So when I squeeze it, I take it out. I turn it to get as much juice out of it as possible. I really want to get all of that out of there. Okay. And now, oh, let me just grab a spoon. All right. So we're going to mix that all together. And this salsa is so delicious on its own. You could use this on top of salads. You could just put it over a bed of greens and have it as a side dish on its own as well. I'm going to add a little bit of salt and pepper. Okay. Then we need to get our avocado ready. So I already have here an avocado that I had grilled before, but I'm going to show you how to cut open an avocado, because that's something that I know a lot of people get a little bit nervous about or aren't really sure how to do it. So this avocado again was washed already, and so I'm just going to cut it. I'm going to cut it in half. I'm going to cut right around the middle, because I want as even halves as possible. The one I just showed you that I already cut, I didn't do as good a job on making it so even. But for this recipe, since we're stuffing the avocado, we want as even as possible. And now I'm going to twist it. And now we have our two halves. And I'm just simply, sometimes you'll see people taking the knife and hacking into the pit. I really don't like that method. I think it's very dangerous. If you're a pro in the kitchen and that's how you can do it, by all means, go ahead. I personally I find it to be a little scary. So I prefer to use a spoon to take the pit out, or this is a pretty nicely ripe avocado without being mushy. So I'm just going to pop it out like that. And now we have our two sides of the avocado. And you could skip the grilling step for this as well. You could simply stuff these right as they are. I like to put them on the grill for just 2 minutes with a little bit of olive oil and some lemon juice, just to get a little bit of extra flavor. And especially since we're talking about July 4th and we're talking about barbecues, I think it's nice to have that flavor, especially if it's for somebody who's vegetarian, who's not going to be having the grilled burger or the grilled chicken or even the grilled fish. So basically what we do is I fill the hole of the center, and then, well, let me do this, because I'm going to pile it on. And this is why, for somebody who's vegetarian, if they're having this as their whole meal, you can pile this on, you can let it go, spread all over the plate, and you have this delicious stuffed avocado. So once, like I said before, there's ways to make this a little bit more of a hearty meal if that's something that you choose. So you could add cheese to this. Feta would be a great addition as well as mozzarella. You could even do manchego cheese in there, would be a little fun twist. You could also add quinoa, and you can make the salsa into a corn and black bean quinoa salad, which quinoa is a whole grain. It's actually a seed, but it's a grain, and it has a lot of protein in it. So if you were somebody who is not having another protein source at the meal, that would be a really nice way to boost the protein, in addition to having the healthy fats from the avocado and the protein from the beans. And that's another delicious way to make it a little bit more of a hearty meal. So those are the two recipes that I wanted to share today. And I'd love to know if there are any more questions.
We have two more. Trisha from Facebook. How much salt would you say you added?
I would say about half a teaspoon.
Okay. And can you think of
well, let me just clarify with the salt. It's really, again, this is like where your flavor preferences come in. I think that, you should taste it and see if it's enough for you. I try not to go too heavy-handed, especially if you were not able to find low sodium canned beans, and the beans are already saltier, you may want to start with a little bit less and then taste it and see how it is. So just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, one more. Can you think of a healthier alternative to tortilla chips if you want to serve the salsa as a dip?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, veggies are always a great conduit for dips. You could do the same thing as the avocado. You could do it with cucumbers. You can get an English cucumber and cut it in half and scoop out the seeds, and then you have basically a cucumber bowl, and that could be a really good dipper for the salsa. And also jicama is another vegetable that I love. It's a pretty mild, if you can find it, it's very mild, and it makes for a really good dipper for the salsa as well. I'm very much of the opinion that everything in moderation, as cliche as it may sound, that really is my belief. I think that if you want to have a few tortilla chips, go ahead and enjoy it. And don't be afraid to enjoy it, especially on a holiday. It's a nice time to have a little bit, as long as you don't go overboard.
Okay, and I actually missed one, and we have some jicama fans in here, by the way.
Oh, great, good.
Yes, and then Nancy from Facebook, did you peel the lime skin with a carrot peeler before you use the juice squeezer?
I didn't. I didn't use the lime zest this time. These were actually very light colored, so it actually looks like I did take the zest off of them, but I didn't do that. Sometimes I do, though. So I mentioned that this is one of my favorite tools. One of my other favorite tools in the kitchen is my microplane zester. I'll show you that, and that's this guy here. And just so you can see, if you wanted to, you could actually, as part of reducing food waste and adding more flavor, you could absolutely add some of the zest to the salsa. So I would just put it right over there, and there you go. You got the zest right in there, and that will add another pop of flavor. And with regard to squeezing the juicing it, once you take the zest off, it's a little bit easier to juice it because you don't have the harder outside. So sometimes people like to do that if you want to use a peeler to take it off. But I would actually say get a zester instead, so that you can make use of the zest. You could even, if you don't have use for the zest in that recipe, save it. I have put it into a little dish, put it into the freezer, and then when I need zest for something in the winter, I have it right, at my fingertips. So that's a great question.
And
is there anything else?
No, I don't see any more.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much to Girls Night Live for having me, and for everyone here who has joined. Again, I just wanted to mention my website is jessicalevinson.com. Please subscribe, and if you want to send me any questions, feel free to do so through my email, through my website as well, and follow me along at jlevinsonrd. And I can't wait to see how everybody makes these recipes, and again, take pictures and share them and tag me.
Well, this was definitely great, and thank you so much for spending your time with us, Jessica. Now we're going to stop the live stream now, so that it's just us here in Zoom. I'm waiting